My name is Daniel Mercer. I'm a deputy U.S. Marshal assigned to the District of Arizona, based out of Tucson. I've been doing fugitive work for 21 years when this happened in late 2023. And it's the reason I don't walk into any institutional building anymore without counting doors and checking hinges. If you're from the Southwest, Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada, you need to hear this. It could save your life. Before I continue, hit that subscribe button if you're interested in true horror stories told by the people who had to write the reports. And drop a comment if you've ever had that feeling in a hospital or nursing home, like the building knew you didn't belong there. Now, let me tell you about the nursing home room that didn't exist on any floor plan. The place was called Santa Rita Care and Memory, about 20 minutes south of Tucson, sitting out where the city thins into desert lots and low tan ridgelines. Not a hospital, not a prison, but it had the same smell I'd encountered in both. Disinfectant over old breath. Bleach trying to cover what time does to bodies. The air conditioning ran too cold, the way facilities do when they're trying to keep everything from rotting. Food, linens, people's dignity. Even in October, the desert sun made the parking lot shimmer like water. Inside, the fluorescent lights turned skin the color of paper. I wasn't there on duty, not officially. I'd gotten the call from my mother while I was in my office, finishing paperwork on a warrant pickup. The kind of work we do is mostly waiting and then sudden movement. Surveillance, a knock, cuffs, transport. My mother's voice didn't have any movement in it. It was flat and frayed. "Danny," she said, "it's Nana. She's not right. They moved her rooms again." My grandmother, Evelyn Mercer, had raised half my cousins and, in a lot of ways, raised me. My mother had finally admitted she couldn't keep her safe at home after Nana started wandering out at night, barefoot, convinced she had to go back to the wash before the rains came. Memory care. That phrase always sounded gentle, like a hand on your shoulder. The reality was locked doors and alarms. "They moved her?" I asked. "Why?" "They said it was for renovations," my mother said. "But she's scared. She keeps saying there's a door that wasn't there before." I'd been in enough domestic calls and missing person searches to know that when an elderly person insists on a detail, you don't dismiss it. Confusion doesn't come from nowhere. It just attaches to whatever's in front of them. A new door, a shadow, a voice in a vent. It's always something real that gets turned into something else. I told my supervisor I was taking a personal afternoon. I drove down I-19 with the windows cracked. The desert smelled like creosote and dust, the faint sweetness that comes after irrigation in a dry place. Traffic was light. I remember the sound of my own breathing, slow, controlled, my body already slipping into the mode I used on operations. My mind did what it always did. Mapped exits, imagined angles, ran scenarios. That habit never shuts off after 2 decades of taking people into custody. Santa Rita sat behind a low stucco wall with a metal gate that opened with a keypad. The landscaping was the kind that pretends to be natural. Rocks arranged like art, a few Palo Verde trees, a saguaro positioned like a sentry. A sign out front had cheerful pastel lettering and a painted sun. I parked and walked in, my boots clicking on tile that had been polished too many times. The front desk receptionist wore scrubs printed with cartoon animals. She smiled like she'd practiced it in a mirror. I gave my name and showed my badge out of reflex, even though I didn't need to. The badge changed her eyes. People always looked different when they saw it, like they suddenly remembered consequences existed. "I'm here to see Evelyn Mercer," I said. Room number? Her smile held, but it tightened. Ms. Mercer was moved to the north wing, she said. I'll call an aide. Moved from where? I asked. From the East Hall, she said quickly, as if the words were hot. We're updating the East Hall bathrooms. It's temporary. In my line of work, temporary could mean anything from a night to forever. I watched her hands. She tapped at a keyboard, nails clicking. A printer behind her spit out a visitor sticker with my name. Aide will take you, she said. While I waited, I listened. Nursing homes have their own soundtrack. Distant televisions, the soft squeak of rubber soles, a cough that doesn't end, a call light chiming like a polite alarm. Under it, there was another sound that didn't fit, an intermittent thud, like someone closing a heavy door slowly, over and over, always somewhere deeper in the building. Not a slam, a measured closing. An aide named Marisol came out. Late 20s, hair pulled back tight, tired eyes. She introduced herself and started walking without much small talk. Her badge said CNA, Certified Nursing Assistant. The people who actually hold the place together. As we moved down the hallway, the smell shifted. Less bleach, more stale carpet. The lights flickered in one section. Not enough to go dark, just enough to make the corners feel unstable. How's my grandmother been? I asked. Marisol hesitated, like she was weighing policy against conscience. Miss Mercer is lucid sometimes, she said. But lately, she's been fixated on a room. A room, I repeated. Marisol's jaw worked. It's nothing, sir. It's just a door. That was the second time someone had reduced it to a door. Like the door was the whole problem. Doors are never just doors. In my job, a door is a boundary, a decision point, a place where people hide and people die. We passed a staff-only sign, and she swiped a badge without looking at me. The lock clicked open. I noted it automatically. Magnetic lock, controlled access, likely tied into the fire system. Most are designed to release in an alarm, but not all. Older facilities sometimes retrofit badly. The north wing was quieter. Too quiet. The televisions were off. The residents' doors were closed. The air felt colder, and it wasn't just the AC. It was that sensation you get in a basement or a canyon slot when the sun disappears and you realize your body has been relying on heat without thinking about it. We stopped at a door labeled 112. Marisol knocked, then opened it. My grandmother sat in a chair by the window, hands folded in her lap like she was waiting for a verdict. She looked smaller than I remembered. Her hair had gone almost fully white, but her eyes, when they found me, were sharp. "Danny," she said, and my throat tightened. "You came." I crossed the room and knelt beside her. She smelled like lotion and powder and something metallic under it, old blood vessels close to skin. I took her hands. They were dry and cool. "Of course I came," I said. "Mom said you were scared." She leaned in, like she didn't trust the walls. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "There's a room," she said. "A room that walks." I didn't laugh. I didn't correct her. I'd worked too many cases where the truth started out sounding impossible. "A room that walks," I repeated softly. "Show me." Her fingers tightened on mine with surprising strength. "Not yet," she said. "You have to listen. It has rules." Behind her, the blinds rattled faintly though the window was closed. A smell drifted through the room, wet soil, like a riverbed after rain. In Tucson, in October, that smell didn't come through sealed windows unless something was very wrong. Marisol stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching us like she was ready to intervene. I caught her eye. "Marisol," I said, keeping my voice calm. "Where's the door she's talking about?" Marisol swallowed. "It's at the end of the hall," she said. "But it's not on the map." "What map?" my grandmother whispered. "The one they keep in the drawer. The one with the lines." "The room isn't there. But it's there anyway." In my head, the procedural part of me clicked on. Facilities have posted evacuation plans, by law, showing floor layouts, exits, fire extinguishers. If a room wasn't on the plan, it either didn't exist, or it was added illegally, or it was something else entirely. I stood. My knees cracked slightly, age announcing itself. I turned toward the hall. "Marisol," I said, "take me to it." She didn't move right away. Her mouth opened, closed. Then she nodded once, like she'd just signed something she couldn't unsign. As we stepped back into the hallway, I noticed something I hadn't noticed on the way in. The carpet runner had a pattern of repeating geometric shapes, like diamonds and stepped lines. It was the kind of motif you see in Southwestern designs, the kind people borrow without thinking. But in that fluorescent light, the pattern looked like a map. Like a series of paths that led somewhere and then abruptly stopped. We walked past 2 more resident doors, then a linen closet, then a blank stretch of wall with framed photos of smiling seniors at a craft table. The frames were slightly crooked, like someone had bumped them in passing. The thudding sound returned, closer now, soft and steady. At the end of the hall, where a fire exit should have been, there was a door. No label, no room number, no exit sign. Just a plain beige door that matched the wall too well, like it had been painted over many times. The handle wasn't the standard lever most facilities used for accessibility. It was an old brass knob, tarnished, the kind you'd see in a house built in the 1960s. Marisol stopped 3 feet short of it and wouldn't go closer. "That's it," she said, voice barely audible. I stared at the door. The air around it smelled stronger now, wet earth and something else beneath it, sharp and animal. My skin prickled along my forearms. The hairs rose like they were responding to static. I leaned in, listening. On the other side, I heard breathing. Not the slow mechanical hiss of an HVAC vent. Not a resident coughing. Breathing that sounded like someone trying to stay quiet. A person, close to the door, inhaling through the nose, exhaling through the mouth, controlled. I reached for the knob. My grandmother's voice came from behind us, carried down the hall with a clarity that didn't match her frail body. "Danny," she called, "don't touch it with your bare hand." I froze, with my fingers an inch from the brass. In all my years, the moments I regretted started exactly like that. A hand reaching, a boundary crossed, a door opened. And somewhere inside the walls of Santa Rita care and memory, something shifted, as if it had been waiting for my decision. Next, the first time I followed the facility's procedures, the building answered with procedures of its own. I did what experience trained me to do when something felt wrong. I stopped moving. I took a breath, and I reassessed. In law enforcement, you learn the hard way that curiosity is not the same as due diligence. People die when they treat an unknown like a puzzle instead of a threat. I pulled a latex glove from my pocket. I carried them the way some guys carried gum, habit from transports and searches. I slid it on slowly, keeping my eyes on the door. The brass knob was pitted with age. It looked damp, though there was no condensation anywhere else. I turned it with the glove between my skin and metal. Cold hit through the latex anyway, like the door had its own temperature. The latch clicked. The door opened inward without resistance. There should have been a room number plaque on the inside, a light switch, an ADA-compliant threshold. Instead, the first thing I saw was darkness that wasn't just absence of light. It was thick, like velvet pressed over an opening. And that smell, wet earth, rolled out like breath from a cave. Marisol whispered behind me, "Sir, please, just don't." My grandmother had followed us down the hall without me noticing. She stood a few yards back, one hand braced on the wall for balance. Her face was pale, but her eyes were fixed on the doorway like she was watching an animal that could hear her heartbeat. "It doesn't like names," she said. I glanced at her. "What do you mean, Nana?" She swallowed. "It learns you. If it learns you, it can call you." The door frame was wrong. That's the best way I can explain it. The hallway had modern drywall, metal studs, clean 90-degree corners. This frame was older wood under layers of paint, rounded at the edges from decades of hands. The paint was cracked like old river mud. I did not step inside. I leaned my head just enough to look. The space beyond wasn't a storage closet or a maintenance room. It was a corridor, narrow and long, slanting slightly downward. The walls were not drywall. They were rough, like plaster over stone. The air inside moved against my face, damp and cool, carrying a faint sound, water dripping somewhere far away. I backed out and closed the door. When it latched, the hallway felt warmer by comparison. "Marisol," I said, keeping my voice level. "Who has keys to that door?" She shook her head. "It isn't on the key ring. It's just there. Sometimes." "Sometimes," I repeated. She nodded, eyes glossy. "It shows up in different places. Not every day. But when it's here, people get pulled." That word landed heavy. Pulled. Not wandered, not confused. Pulled implied force. I looked down the hallway. It ended in that door. No side halls, no turns. If the door wasn't there, the wall would be blank. I tried to picture it without the door. My mind wouldn't settle on an image, like the hallway had always ended in something. I said, "Has administration reported this?" Marisol's laugh was a single breath. "To who?" "In my agency, if a federal facility had an unregistered room, it would trigger inspections, audits, fire safety violations, maybe criminal charges. Santa Rita was private. The state oversaw licensing. The county did health inspections, fire department checked suppression systems, but those systems assumed the building was honest about its own shape." My grandmother took my arm. Her grip was strong enough to hurt. "You're going to think you can handle it," she said, "because you always did. But it doesn't care what you did out there. It cares what you owe." "What I owe?" I asked. She leaned close. Her breath smelled faintly of mint from a lozenge. "We all owe the land," she whispered, "and the land remembers." That was the first time she said something that sounded like folklore instead of dementia. It was also something my grandfather, a miner, used to say when storms came in wrong. The land remembers. I walked my grandmother back to her room. I told Marisol I'd be speaking with the facility director. She looked relieved, like she'd been waiting for someone in authority to take the weight. But there was fear under it, because she knew authority didn't always mean safety. The director was a woman named Cynthia Halpern, late 50s, blouse too crisp, hair too controlled. She met me in her office with the calm of someone used to handling complaints. Behind her desk, a framed photo showed the facility at sunset, the building glowing warm, a lie in a frame. "Deputy Marshal Mercer," she said, glancing at my badge again. "We're honored to have you visit." "I'm here as family," I said, "but I saw something in your north wing that concerns me." Her smile didn't move. "If you're referring to your grandmother's agitation, I assure you we're addressing her anxiety with appropriate protocols." I kept my hands on my knees, open posture, the way we're trained in interviews. "I'm referring to an unmarked door at the end of the North Wing Hall, a corridor beyond it. It doesn't appear on any posted evacuation map." There was a pause. In that pause, I heard the building's AC cycle on, a low groan through vents. Cynthia's eyes flicked, just once, toward a locked filing cabinet behind her. "That door is part of an older section of the building," she said. "It's sealed off for safety. Residents do not have access." "It was open," I said. "It had a functioning knob, no signage, no barrier." She sighed, like I was forcing her to explain something boring. "We've had maintenance issues. Our staff is trained to redirect residents away from restricted areas." "Redirect," I repeated. "How many times has a resident accessed that door?" Her lips pressed together. "Mr. Mercer, dementia patients can become fixated on non-existent details. They can confabulate. Your grandmother—" "Marisol said the door appears sometimes," I interrupted. "Is that what you'd call confabulation?" Cynthia's smile finally faltered. Just a crack. Then it returned, sharper. "I'm not sure which staff member you spoke to. I can assure you there is no phenomenon here. We are licensed. We are inspected." Inspected. Like that covered everything. Like a checklist could account for a door that wasn't supposed to exist. I left her office with my jaw tight. In the hallway outside, I paused at the posted evacuation plan. It showed a clean rectangle of corridors, room numbers, exits. The north wing ended in a wall. No door, no corridor. I took out my phone and snapped a photo. Timestamp, 1542. October 17th, 2023. Tucson, Arizona. That night, I went home and did what I always did when something didn't fit. I started building a case file. Not official, personal. But I knew how to structure information, chronology, sources, witness statements. I wrote my grandmother's claims down verbatim. Room that walks. It doesn't like names. It learns you. It can call you. Rules. Rules meant consistency. Consistency meant this wasn't random. If the phenomenon had rules, it could be tracked, maybe avoided. If it had rules, it had intent. The next day I returned with my mother. We brought Nana a new blanket, a photo album. Normal things to anchor her. But Nana barely looked at them. She watched the hallway like she was waiting for a storm. "Did it move?" she asked me. "Move where?" my mother said, trying to keep her voice gentle. Nana ignored her. She looked at me. "Did the door move?" I felt my stomach drop. "How do you know it moves?" Nana's gaze slid to the ceiling vents. "It listens," she said. "It hears when you talk about it." That day, I started noticing small things. Doors that should have been locked weren't. A hallway that felt longer than it was the day before. A faint, muddy footprint on clean tile near a supply closet. Toes splayed like someone walked barefoot through wet ground. The staff cleaned constantly, but the footprint returned by afternoon. At 18:10, I heard a shout from down the hall. A call light chimed. Then a second. Then someone screamed. Not the panicked scream of a fall, but a scream with terror in it. Like a person seeing something that made language useless. I ran. My mother followed, breathless. We reached the end of the North Wing Hall. The unmarked door was there again. This time, It wasn't fully closed. It hung open a few inches, like an invitation. A resident stood in front of it. His name tag on his sweater read Arthur. He was tall, thin, maybe mid-70s. His eyes were wide, unfocused. His mouth moved like he was whispering to someone inside. Marisol grabbed his arm. "Mr. Haskins, no, come back, please." Arthur turned his head slightly. His voice was calm, almost relieved. "They found my wife," he said. "She's down there. She's calling me." Marisol looked at me, pleading. Cynthia Halpern appeared behind her, face flushed. "Get him away," Cynthia snapped. "Now!" Arthur took one step forward. The air from the doorway intensified, damp and cold, carrying the sound of dripping water and something else. A low murmur like distant voices speaking underwater. I moved without thinking, the way I had moved on warrants. I wrapped my arm around Arthur's chest from behind and pulled him back. The moment my boot crossed the threshold by accident, just the toe, pain shot up my leg like I'd stepped on ice and fire at the same time. A numb burn. My foot went cold, then tingled hard enough to make my teeth ache. Arthur twisted with strength he shouldn't have had. He grabbed the doorframe with both hands. His fingers pressed into the cracked paint like it was soft. "Let me go," he said, not angry. "It's my turn." My mother sobbed behind me. Marisol tried to pry his fingers loose, but they held. Then the door breathed in. That's the only way I can describe it. The air surged inward, pulling at our clothes, our hair, our skin. Arthur's body lurched forward. I tightened my grip, planting my injured foot back on the tile, pain spiking again. For a second, I thought I had him. Then Arthur's sweater tore at the seam. The fabric ripped like paper. He slipped out of it, leaving me holding cloth. Arthur went through the doorway like he was being reeled in, not thrown, not dragged, guided. His bare feet hit the damp floor inside once, twice. Then darkness swallowed him, and the corridor's sound went silent, as if someone had shut a heavy door far away. The unmarked door swung closed by itself. Click. Marisol stood shaking, hands empty. Cynthia stared at the door like she'd seen it do that before. My mother clutched my arm, nails digging into my sleeve. I stared at the brass knob, still tarnished, still damp. On the tile in front of the door, a wet footprint appeared. Arthur's foot. Heel and toes perfectly imprinted in mud that had no source. Then another footprint formed beside it, smaller, like a child's. It pointed away from the door, toward us. And it started walking. Next, when we reviewed the security footage, the hallway on the tape didn't match the hallway we'd been standing in. In my career, I'd seen people disappear. Runaways, fugitives, missing hikers who got swallowed by terrain. But there was always a mechanism, a vehicle, a canyon, a choice. What happened to Arthur Haskins didn't have a mechanism that belonged in our world. The staff reacted like a well-rehearsed drill. That's what stood out first. No one screamed. No one ran in after him. Marisol hit a wall phone and called a code I didn't recognize. Cynthia ordered 2 aides to clear the wing. Residents were redirected behind locked doors, the way you do during a violent incident. A maintenance worker showed up within 2 minutes with a portable barrier, a folding metal gate, and positioned it in front of the unmarked door as if they'd done it before. My foot still burned. The toe that had crossed the threshold felt numb and hot at the same time, like frostbite under a heat lamp. I flexed it. The pain answered, precise. I said, "Call 911. Cynthia's eyes snapped to mine. "We are handling this internally." Arthur just vanished into a corridor that isn't on your floor plan, I said. That's a missing person. That's an emergency. She stepped closer and lowered her voice, trying to keep it contained. Deputy Marshal Mercer, I respect your background, but you are not acting in your official capacity. No, I said. I'm acting as someone who just witnessed an abduction. Cynthia's expression hardened. If you make this public, you will cause panic. Families will pull residents. People will get hurt. People are already getting hurt, I said. Marisol stood a few feet away, staring at the wet footprints that had begun moving. The smaller set, child-sized, paced slowly in a semicircle. Each step appeared with a faint squelch sound, wet on dry tile. The mud smelled like riverbank, silt, decaying leaves, iron. It didn't evaporate. It didn't smear like normal mud. It stayed crisp, as if the ground itself had stamped it. Then the footprints stopped at my boot. The toe of my right boot, the one that had crossed the threshold, darkened. The leather soaked as if dipped in water. The smell of wet earth rose stronger, and I felt a tug in my stomach, subtle, like vertigo. My grandmother's voice cut through the hallway from behind the barrier of aids. It marked you, she said. My mother tried to hush her, but Nana kept speaking, louder now. It marked him. He touched it. Cynthia looked at Nana with visible irritation. Not pity, not concern. Irritation like Nana was breaking a rule. That was my first real clue that Cynthia believed. Not in a spiritual way, in an operational way. Like she knew this thing existed and had decided the correct response was containment. I demanded to see the security footage. Cynthia refused. I threatened to call my supervisor and request a federal welfare check. Cynthia's jaw clenched. Finally, she agreed to show me a limited segment in her office, with the condition that I not record it. I recorded it anyway, discreetly, because that's what you do when someone in authority is more concerned with optics than facts. The footage was time-stamped 1812, same day. Camera labeled N-Wing Hall 3. I watched myself on the screen grappling Arthur. I watched Arthur slip out of his sweater. I watched him step into darkness. But the hallway on camera wasn't right. On the footage, the North Wing corridor ended 10 feet sooner than where we'd been standing. The unmarked door was closer to the last resident room than it was in reality. The framed photos on the wall were different. One showed a Christmas party that hadn't happened yet, dated 2024 in the corner. The carpet runner pattern looked sharper, more geometric, like a different weave. Most disturbing, when Arthur crossed the threshold, the corridor beyond the door was not a slanting stone passage. It was a room. A normal, institutional room with a bed and a window. A nursing home room. A room that looked exactly like my grandmother's. Cynthia watched my face as I watched the screen. The camera's glitch, she said. Old system. Old systems don't fabricate rooms, I said. She didn't answer. That night, I couldn't sleep. The toe on my right foot throbbed with a slow pulse. When I closed my eyes, I smelled wet soil. I could still hear the faint underwater murmur that had come from beyond the door. I went back the next morning with a notebook and a tape measure. Not because I thought numbers would save me, but because numbers don't lie unless someone forces them to. I measured the North Wing hall from the nurses' station to the end. Then I measured it again after lunch. Then again at dusk. The length changed, not by inches, by feet. At 0920, the corridor was 74 feet. At 1305, it was 81 feet. At 1830, it was 76. Buildings don't do that. I checked for renovation barriers, temporary walls, Nothing. Same tile, same baseboards, same light fixtures. The only variable was the feeling in my body as I walked, like walking into a headwind you couldn't see. I requested the facility's architectural plans under the pretext of fire safety. Cynthia gave me a packet, photocopied, with a permit stamp from 1998. Santa Rita had been built on the site of an older structure, something labeled Santa Rita Sanitarium, decommissioned. I'd never heard of it. The plans showed no door at the end of the north wing, no corridor. The wall was solid. The square footage ended clean. But in the margin, faintly, like a smudge someone had tried to erase, there was a handwritten note in pencil. Do not open. RM0. Room 0. I took the packet to a friend of mine, retired fire inspector named Walt Jaramillo. Walt had done 25 years in Pima County Fire, the kind of guy who knew every code and every backroom handshake between builders and regulators. He met me at a diner off Valencia Road, coffee black, hands steady. I slid the plans across the table. Walt stared at the note. His face changed. "Where did you get this?" he asked. "Santa Rita," I said. "They claim it's just an older, sealed section." Walt's eyes flicked up to mine. "Danny," he said quietly, "that site was a problem before it was a nursing home." I leaned in. The diner smelled like frying oil and cinnamon from pancakes. The normalcy made Walt's tone feel heavier. Walt said, "Back in the 70s, there was a sanitarium there. Not officially a hospital, more like a private long-term care facility. They took in people with dementia, TB survivors, people nobody wanted to deal with. Records were thin." "Any incidents?" I asked. Walt's throat bobbed. "Missing residents, fires that weren't fires, smoke alarms going off with no smoke. One time, a crew responded and found a hallway that didn't exist on the blueprints. They wrote it up. The report vanished." "Vanished," I echoed. He nodded. "We called it the slip hall. Guys joked about it, then stopped joking. Because once you saw it, you started hearing things. You started dreaming about wet ground." My right toe pulsed like it recognized the words. "Why wet ground?" I asked. Walt looked toward the window, out at the desert sun, like he was checking for listeners. "Because the building sits on a wash," he said. "An old one. Before Tucson expanded, before the roads. Water used to run through there in monsoon season." A wash. Nana had said she needed to go back to the wash before the rains. Her confusion had attached itself to a real thing, a memory older than the facility. Walt took a sip of coffee, then set the cup down carefully. "There's something local, too," he said. "You ever hear of the autumn stories about the Hihim? The ones who went into the earth?" I'd grown up in Arizona. I'd heard bits, usually in passing, usually treated like myths. But I'd also worked with tribal officers on the Tohono O'odham Nation near the border. I'd learned you don't treat their stories like entertainment. Walt continued. "There's a belief about places where the ground remembers footsteps. Places where the boundary between rooms, between worlds, gets thin. Especially near washes, caves, old burial sites." "Are you saying this is spiritual?" I asked. Walt's eyes were tired. "I'm saying it's real enough that people in my department were told, unofficially, to never go alone in that building. And if you find a door that isn't on the plan, you mark it, you report it, and you walk away." Walk away. That was the advice. But I couldn't. Arthur was gone. My grandmother lived there. And now My foot was marked. I went back to Santa Rita that afternoon and asked Marisol to meet me outside, away from cameras. We stood by the dumpsters where the air smelled like sun-baked trash and antiseptic disposal bags. Marisol lit a cigarette with trembling hands, even though the sign said no smoking. "I know it sounds crazy," she said, voice hoarse, "but it takes people, and it gives some back." "Gives them back?" I asked. Marisol nodded. "Not the same. Different. Like they've been rinsed out." "Who came back?" I asked. She stared at the ground. "A woman named Tanya Rios," she said. "Last year. She was missing for 6 hours. Cameras showed her go in. Then she came out of a supply closet on the other side of the wing. She was barefoot, covered in mud. She kept saying the room was full of beds, like a ward, and there were children under the beds. She died 3 days later from aspiration pneumonia, but she kept trying to drink water, like she couldn't quench it." My stomach tightened. "Any other names?" Marisol nodded slowly. "Arthur Haskins. Now. Before that, Mr. Len Doyle. He went in and never came out. And a CNA, Reuben. He went in after Len. They said he quit. He didn't quit." "You're sure?" I asked. Marisol's eyes filled. "They made us sign papers," she said. "Non-disclosure. They said it was to protect residents' privacy, but it was to protect the facility. Government cover-up wasn't always black helicopters. Sometimes it was a stack of paperwork, a threat of losing your job, and inspectors who didn't look too hard." I asked, "What are the rules?" Marisol blew smoke, then coughed. "It appears after someone talks about leaving," she said. "Or after someone says they're looking for someone. It likes people who are searching. It likes family. It likes guilt." My grandmother's words came back. "It cares what you owe." Marisol continued. "And you don't say the names, not near it. If you say a name, it learns the voice. Then it can use it." I felt sweat break under my collar despite the air conditioning. "Use it how?" Marisol's gaze lifted to the building. "It calls," she said. "Like someone you love. Like someone who needs you." That night, I sat by my grandmother's bed while my mother went home to sleep. Nana's eyes were open, reflecting the dim TV glow even though the TV was off. The room smelled like lavender soap and, faintly, wet earth that didn't belong. Nana whispered, "You're going to hear me," she said. "But it won't be me." I swallowed. "Nana, what is it?" She turned her head, slow, like it hurt. "It's a place that takes the lost," she said. "But it makes them pay with memory. It eats what makes you, you. Then it wears you like a coat." I sat there until 2 o'clock. At 2:17, the call light in the hallway chimed once, then twice, then a third time. The sound echoed longer than it should have, like the hallway had deepened. Outside Nana's door, the carpet pattern seemed to shift under the nightlights. The geometric shapes looked like steps descending. I stood, heart steady but heavy, and opened Nana's door just enough to look out. At the far end of the hall, the unmarked door stood open. And from inside it, in my grandmother's voice, clear as if she stood beside me, I heard, "Danny? Help me. I'm down here." My grandmother's real hand tightened on my wrist from behind me. Her voice was a rasp in my ear. "Don't answer," she whispered. "If you answer, It knows you're listening. I stood frozen between two voices, one real, one perfect imitation, while the wet earth smell thickened and the building's lights flickered like a failing heartbeat. Next. The first time I broke the rules to save someone, the room took payment from my body instead of my pride. The training manuals never cover what to do when a building speaks in your loved one's voice. In my work, we're taught to establish command presence, to control a scene, to prevent emotional decisions. But in that hallway, at 217, I felt something older than training rise in me, the instinct to protect family. That instinct has saved people. It has also gotten people killed. I didn't answer the voice. I didn't step toward the door. I did the only thing that fit both my job and my grandmother's warning. I documented. I pulled my phone out and hit record. The hallway was lit by low amber night lights. The unmarked door at the end was open, and darkness beyond it looked wet, like the inside of a storm cloud. The voice, my grandmother's, called again, softer, urgent, as if she were trying not to wake staff. "Danny, please, I'm cold." My grandmother was behind me, breathing shallow, hand clamped on my wrist. Her real voice was almost inaudible. "It's learning you," she said. The voice from the door changed. It wasn't Nana now. It was my mother. "Danny," it said, and my spine went tight. "Come on. I can't do this without you." It wasn't a distorted imitation. It was perfect. Same cadence, same slight break on the D in my name. It carried the fatigue my mother always had when she was scared, but pretending she wasn't. I felt my throat try to respond on reflex. My tongue pressed against my teeth. I forced air out through my nose, slow. "Don't answer. Don't let it hear you agree." Then I heard something else. Crying. A thin, childlike sob from inside the corridor. A sound designed to bypass reason. My right toe throbbed, and the skin on the top of my foot prickled as if insects crawled under it. I looked down. The leather of my boot, on that marked toe, had darkened again, dampening like it was wicking water from somewhere below the tile. I backed into Nana's room and shut the door. The voice stopped instantly, like a switch flipped. The silence was worse because it felt intentional, like the building had tested me and taken notes. At 07 o'clock, Cynthia Halpern called a care conference with my mother and me. That's what facilities do when they want to keep things contained. Meetings, paperwork, polite language. Cynthia's office smelled like citrus cleaner. There was a bowl of candy on her desk no one touched. She offered condolences for Arthur Haskins. Her condolences sounded like a press release. "Arthur was prone to wandering," she said. "We have protocols. We are reviewing—" "Stop," I said. "He didn't wander. He was pulled." Cynthia's eyes narrowed. "Deputy Marshal Mercer, if you continue using that language, I will have to request you leave the facility." "I have a video of the door calling in my mother's voice," I said. My mother stiffened beside me. Cynthia's gaze flicked to the filing cabinet again. That cabinet had become, in my mind, a symbol of everything hidden. Cynthia said carefully, "We are aware of anomalies." That was the closest she came to admitting reality. "Then you're aware this is killing people," I said. Cynthia's lips pressed into a line. "We have worked with appropriate channels," she said. "State health?" I asked. She didn't answer. "Federal?" I asked. She glanced at my badge, then away. "There are agencies," she said. "People who advised us not to escalate. They said containment is safer. Containment. The word hit like a confession. I leaned forward. Who advised you? Cynthia's voice dropped. A man who identified himself as Mr. R. He had credentials. He had access to records I didn't even know existed. He told us if we reported the door as anything other than a structural issue, the facility would be shut down and residents would be displaced. He said the phenomenon follows displacement. You believed him, I said. I had to, she snapped, emotion flashing for the first time. Do you know what it costs to move 93 residents? Do you know how many die within weeks of relocation? He told me that would be blood on my hands. My mother whispered, So you kept quiet. Cynthia's eyes hardened again. I kept them housed, she said. I kept staff employed. And we have rules. I asked, What rules? Cynthia hesitated, then said, Do not speak names near the door. Do not respond to voices. Do not cross the threshold. If someone crosses, she stopped. If someone crosses what? I demanded. Cynthia exhaled. Then 2 staff members secure the wing. No one follows. We wait for the door to move. My mother's face went pale. You just wait, she said. Cynthia's voice was small now. Sometimes they come back. And sometimes they don't, I said. Cynthia nodded once. The meeting ended with nothing resolved. Cynthia offered to transfer Nana to another facility. My grandmother, when asked, said one sentence that shut the idea down. It'll follow, she whispered. That afternoon, I drove to the Tohono O'odham Nation and met with a cultural liaison named Elias Miguel. I'd worked with Elias years earlier on a missing hiker case near Baboquivari Peak. He was in his 60s, a calm man with eyes that watched without rushing. We met at a shaded ramada outside a community building. The desert air smelled of mesquite smoke from somewhere nearby. I told him everything. Not the dramatized version, the procedural version. Dates, times, footage discrepancies, measurements changing. The footprint phenomenon, the voice mimicry, the wash beneath the building. Elias listened, hands folded. When I finished, he didn't look surprised. He looked tired. He said, There are places where the earth opens its memory, he told me. Not like a cave, like a story opening. And if you step into it, you become part of what it remembers. Is there a name for it? I asked. Elias shook his head. Naming gives power, he said. Some things you don't name. But there is a warning about rooms without corners, places inside buildings that are not part of the building. They are part of the land. I asked, Why would it appear in a nursing home? Elias looked toward the horizon where heat shimmered. Because that is where the lost gather, he said. People whose minds are leaving. People searching for what they misplaced. Memory draws it. My grandmother's condition wasn't random. Her mind, slipping, was like a beacon. The door didn't just exist near her. It fed on her kind of loss. Elias continued, And it takes what you offer without words. It takes what you owe. That phrase again, like a loop closing. I asked, How do you stop it? Elias's gaze returned to me, steady. You don't stop the land, he said. You bargain. But bargains require sacrifice. The next incident happened 2 days later, October 19th, 2023, 21:48. I was in Nana's room again. My mother had gone home. The hall was quieter than usual, as if the facility held its breath at night. A call light chimed, then a shout. Marisol ran past Nana's door, face white, heading toward the north wing end. I followed. My body moved before my mind finished deciding. Muscle memory from too many scenes. At the end of the hall, the unmarked door stood open. A different resident, Lenora Bishop, 82, stood at the threshold. I knew her name because Nana had mentioned her as the lady who sings hymns. Lenora's face was wet with tears. "My boy is in there," she whispered. Marisol grabbed her elbow. "Lenora, no, please." Lenora's gaze snapped to me. She looked straight through my badge, through my authority, into whatever part of me still believed I could save everyone. "My boy died in 91, she said. "But he's calling me. He says he's scared." From inside the doorway, a man's voice spoke, young and trembling. "Mama? Mama, please." Lenora took a step. Marisol tried to pull her back, but Lenora shoved her away with surprising force. Marisol stumbled, hit the wall, and slid down, dazed. I reached for Lenora. My gloved hand brushed her sleeve. And the door breathed in again. The pull hit me harder this time, as if it recognized me. My right foot slid forward a fraction on tile. The marked toe of my boot dampened instantly. The wet earth smell flooded my nose so strongly it tasted like metal at the back of my tongue. Lenora's body jerked toward the corridor. I wrapped both arms around her from behind, locking my grip. My shoulders strained. My breath came in short bursts. I dug my boots in. The voice from inside changed. It became my grandmother's voice again. "Danny," it said softly, "don't fight. Let her come. Let me come. You're tired." My eyes stung. Not tears. Something like pressure behind the eyes, the physical response to stress and disbelief. I clenched my jaw until it ached. I yelled, not words, just a harsh sound, because I couldn't let it hear me speak names, couldn't let it learn more. Lenora's hand reached back and grabbed my wrist, her nails dug in. "Let me go," she whispered. I shook my head once, hard, like I could shake the suggestion out of the air. I hauled her backward with everything in me. For a second, it worked. Her heels slid on tile. The pull weakened. Then my right boot stuck, not like it caught on carpet, like the tile had turned to mud around the toe. I felt my foot sink a half-inch. Cold surged through my boot, up my ankle. The pain that had been in my toe moved like a stain, spreading. I looked down. The tile under my boot had darkened in a perfect outline of a footprint, wet mud seeping from nowhere. The door wasn't just pulling, it was anchoring me. Elias's words rang in my head. Bargains require sacrifice. I made a decision in that instant that I still don't know how to judge. I let go of Lenora with one arm and reached down with the other, grabbed my boot and yanked. The boot didn't move. The mud held it like a hand. I didn't have time for finesse. I drew the small rescue knife I carried on my belt, used for cutting seat belts, zip ties, anything in emergencies. I hooked the blade under my bootlaces and sawed through. The laces snapped. I kicked my foot free. Not from the boot, from my own boot, leaving it behind like shed skin. I stumbled backward, socked foot landing on dry tile, and pulled Lenora with me. Marisol shouted. 2 aides rushed in and grabbed Lenora's arms. We dragged her away from the threshold. The unmarked door swung shut with that same measured finality. Click. Silence. My heart hammered. Sweat ran down my spine. My right foot, in a thin sock, felt exposed and wrong. The sock was damp at the toes, not from sweat, but from wet earth seeping through fabric. I looked down. Mud stained my sock in the exact shape of toes. Not my boot's toe. My toes. I had been marked deeper. Marisol stared at my foot with a horror that told me she'd never seen someone escape that way. Lenora sobbed in an aide's arms, whispering, "He was so cold. He was so cold." Cynthia arrived, face tight, and looked at my abandoned boot near the door. Her eyes flicked to my sock, to the mud, and she whispered, almost to herself, "Now it has you." That night, when I finally sat back in Nana's room, my foot wrapped in a towel, Nana reached out and touched my mud-stained toes with trembling fingers. Her voice was gentle. "You paid," she said, "but it'll want more." And somewhere in the building's quiet, I heard that distant underwater murmur again, like a crowd speaking in a place without air. Next, I followed the door once, on purpose. And what I found inside was the reason the government wanted it kept quiet. After Lenora, after my boot, I stopped pretending this was a matter of facility negligence. The door was an organism in the shape of architecture, and it had started including me in its pattern. I went back to Elias Miguel and told him what happened. He listened, then asked one question that made my stomach sink. "Did you leave something of yours there?" he said. "My boot," I answered. He nodded once. "Then it has a piece of your trail," he said. "It can follow your steps now, not only inside that building." I asked him what kind of sacrifice could satisfy something like that. Elias didn't give me a ritual. He didn't give me a weapon. He gave me an ethical problem. "You can't take from it," he said. "You can only give back what was taken from the land. That place, your nursing home, is built on something it shouldn't cover." Walt Jaramillo gave me the next piece. He dug through old contacts and found a retired county clerk who still had microfilm access. We met in a back room that smelled like paper and dust. Walt slid a photocopy across the table, an excerpt from a 1978 incident report, partially redacted. It described Santa Rita Sanitarium. It described a restricted ward, referred to as Ward 0. It described patients moved off the books, people who didn't exist in official census counts. It described a night when the fire department responded to alarms and found a corridor of damp stone where a supply room should have been. It described one firefighter, name blacked out, who stepped through and experienced auditory hallucinations of familial voices. He was recovered hours later, barefoot, incoherent, with mud under his fingernails and severe amnesia regarding personal identifiers. At the bottom, the report ended with a line that chilled me. Federal liaison advised closure of Ward 0 access point. Recommend continued suppression of public record. Liaison initials, R. Mr. R. Cynthia's man. Government awareness wasn't new. It had been ongoing for decades, managed like a leak in a dam. Patch it, redirect the flow, keep people from asking why the river is rising. I went back to Santa Rita at 23:30 on October 21st. I didn't tell my mother. I didn't tell Cynthia. I told Marisol because she deserved honesty and because she knew the rhythms of the place. Marisol met me at the staff entrance, eyes hollow from sleeplessness. "You're going in," she said. Not a question. "I have to," I said. "Arthur, Reuben, Len, if there's any chance." Marisol shook her head. "No one comes back whole," she whispered. "I'm not trying to bring them back whole," I said. "I'm trying to bring them back at all." I had prepared like I would for a high-risk warrant, except the target wasn't human. I wore gloves. I carried a headlamp, a spare flashlight, a radio, and a body camera I'd purchased privately, something that saved to internal storage. I carried a length of paracord and a roll of evidence tape. I left my badge behind. Authority didn't matter in there. Nana was awake when I slipped into her room. She looked at my gear and didn't ask why. She just nodded, like she'd been expecting it. "You're going to cross," she said. "Yes," I whispered. She reached under her pillow and pulled out something small wrapped in tissue paper. A dried bundle of desert herbs tied with string. Creosote and sage, maybe. The smell hit my nose, bitter, clean, like rain memory. "Elias gave me this when I was a girl," she said. "For when you go where you shouldn't." I hesitated. "Nana." "Take it," she said, "and listen. Don't follow voices. Follow water. The land tells the truth through water." I took the bundle and tucked it into my pocket. At 0012, I walked the north wing hallway alone. The nightlights cast long shadows. The air felt heavier near the end, dampness seeping into the AC-cooled sterility. My right foot, now in a new boot, ached inside the leather. The toes felt hypersensitive, like they could taste the air. The unmarked door was there. It was open. The smell of wet earth poured out. My stomach rolled, not fear exactly, but the body's instinctive rejection of wrong environments, like stepping into a swamp when you expect tile. I did not speak. I did not say my grandmother's name. I did not say Arthur's. I tied the paracord around my waist and anchored the other end around a heavy handrail bracket bolted into the wall. Not perfect, but better than nothing. I marked the threshold with a strip of evidence tape, bright yellow, a line of human intention. Then I stepped through. The temperature dropped instantly. My breath fogged. The headlamp beam cut into the dark and revealed rough walls that looked like plaster over stone, damp with condensation. The floor slanted downward, gritty under my boots like packed dirt rather than concrete. The air tasted of iron and mildew, and underneath it there was the faint sweetness of rot. Behind me, the doorway remained visible for a few seconds, an ordinary rectangle of nursing home hallway light. Then the edges blurred, like heat shimmer in reverse, and the light dimmed until it looked far away. My radio hissed with static. No signal. I moved slowly, one hand on the paracord, the other holding my flashlight low to catch texture on the floor. My senses sharpened the way they do on night searches, ears tuned, skin alert. After maybe 20 feet, the corridor widened into a room. Not a storage room. A ward. Rows of beds lined both sides, iron frames like old hospital equipment. Some beds were empty, sheets stained brown with age. Others were occupied by shapes under blankets that rose and fell as if breathing. The smell was overwhelming here. Wet earth, old sweat, urine, antiseptic so old it had turned sweet. My stomach clenched hard, and I swallowed bile. The headlamp beam caught something on the far wall, a painted mural, faded, of a desert wash with children playing at the water's edge. The style was mid-century, institutional cheer meant to calm patients. But the faces in the mural were wrong. Too smooth, eyes too dark, mouths too small. The water in the mural looked like a black ribbon. I heard a drip. Not random, rhythmic, like a slow IV line. I followed the sound, careful, and realized it wasn't dripping from the ceiling. It was coming from under one of the beds. I crouched, flashlight sweeping beneath. Under the bed, a child stared back at me. Not a living child. Skin the color of wet clay, hair stuck to forehead, eyes too reflective, like animal eyes in a spotlight. Its mouth opened slightly, and the smell of river mud rolled out. It didn't crawl toward me. It just watched. Then it spoke without moving its lips, in a voice that wasn't sound but understanding pressed into my skull. You left a trail. My right toes burned. I forced myself to look away and keep moving. Follow water. Not voices. Follow water. The room had doorways really, leading into side corridors. One of them had a faint draft, cooler, damp. I followed it. As I walked, voices started. Soft at first, like distant staff chatter. Then clearer. Danny? My mother's voice behind me. I didn't turn. My pulse quickened, but I kept my breathing steady. Danny, please. My grandmother's voice from the left. I kept walking. Then a new voice, male, unfamiliar, calm, spoke from ahead, as if someone stood around the corner. Deputy Marshal Mercer, it said. You're trespassing in a restricted site. My blood went cold. Not because of the supernatural, because of the procedural familiarity. Someone using my title in that tone. A flashlight beam appeared ahead, white and crisp, not my own. It swung across the corridor wall. I stopped. A man stepped into view wearing plain clothes, dark jacket, khakis, carrying a high-end flashlight. He looked like a federal investigator, mid-40s, clean-shaven, eyes flat. On his belt was a badge case, but it was turned inward, not displayed. Who are you? I demanded, keeping my voice low. He smiled slightly, like I'd confirmed something. You can call me Reed, he said. You're in an environment that reacts to identity. Names complicated. Are you Mr. R? I asked. His expression didn't change. You shouldn't have come, he said. What is this place? I asked, forcing each word. How long has the government known? Reed's flashlight beam slid to my right foot. He noticed the way I held it, the subtle limp. It marked you, he said. You're on its list now. My grandmother is in that facility, I said. Residents are being taken. Reed's voice remained even. Residents have been taken here since the sanitarium days, he said. And before that. Before that? I said. He nodded toward the damp stone. This is a wash, he said. An old path water used. The land opens when enough people are losing their way. Memory care concentrates that. The building acts like a cap. But caps leak. I asked, why not shut it down? Reed's eyes flicked, almost pity. Because relocation increases activity, he said. Displacement spreads it. If it's contained here, it's localized. Localized, like a chemical spill, like radioactive waste. People as collateral to keep a phenomenon pinned to one site. I felt something in me harden. Anger, disgust, the kind that makes your hands shake. So you let them die, I said. Reed's gaze stayed flat. We manage risk, he said. And we pay it. The corridor behind him darkened. The underwater murmur rose, louder now. Reed's head tilted slightly, as if listening. It's aware you're here, he said. It likes authority figures. They think they can impose order. It enjoys breaking them. My right foot burned hotter. I smelled wet earth thickening, like rain building overhead. I realized the bargain Elias mentioned wasn't about giving the phenomenon something new. It was about returning what the land had been denied. The sanitarium, I said, thinking fast. Ward 0. The people they hid. The ones off the books. Reed's eyes narrowed. You covered them up, I said. You erased them. You made them not exist. And now the land makes rooms that don't exist. It mirrors what you did. For the first time, Reed looked unsettled. Just a flicker. Then the voices changed. Not my family, not comforting. Crying. Dozens of voices, thin and wet, coming from the ward behind us. The air pulled inward, and the corridor trembled like a living throat. Reed stepped back. It's opening, he said. If you're going to leave, leave now. I stared at him. Arthur, I said, breaking my own rule, because rage made me reckless. Reuben, Len Doyle, where are they? The moment I said Arthur's name, the air snapped. A voice, Arthur's, came from the dark behind me. Not muffled, not distant, right at my ear. Danny, Arthur whispered. It's not a room, it's a mouth. My skin went cold. My breath hitched. Reed's hand shot out and grabbed my shoulder hard. I told you, he hissed. No names. The corridor breathed in, violent now. The paracord at my waist yanked, tightening, pulling me backward toward the ward. My boots slid on damp grit. My flashlight beam jittered. I fought, muscles straining, but the pull wasn't just physical. It was emotional, images flooding my mind. My grandmother alone, my mother crying, faces from old cases, people I couldn't save. The phenomenon wasn't inventing fears, it was using mine. In that moment, the moral choice wasn't, do I go deeper? It was, do I let it use my guilt as a handle? I forced my mind onto procedure. Anchor, exit, breathe. I reached into my pocket and crushed the herb bundle Nana gave me. The dry leaves broke into powder. The smell, creosote and sage, burst sharp, cutting through the wet earth odor like sunlight through smoke. The pull weakened, not stopped, but disrupted like the thing inhaling had coughed. Reed's eyes widened slightly. Where did you get that? He demanded. I didn't answer. I used the moment to stagger backward, hand over hand on the paracord, dragging myself toward the faint rectangle of nursing home light that was now distant and flickering. The voices screamed behind me, no longer imitations, but the raw sound of need. My toes burned like they were being branded. I smelled mud and blood and old antiseptic. As I neared the threshold, the corridor tried one last trick. My grandmother's voice, real and broken, whispered from inside the darkness, Danny, I'm sorry. It hit me like a bullet, because Nana did apologize like that sometimes, in lucid moments, for being a burden. It sounded real. It sounded like her. My hand hesitated on the paracord. Reed shouted, Don't! I didn't respond. I didn't speak. I just moved. I crossed the evidence tape line and stumbled back into the north wing hallway, air conditioning blasting dry cold against my damp skin. The smell of wet earth clung to me anyway, embedded in my nose like a stain. The door behind me swung shut with a slow, satisfied click. I fell to my knees on tile, panting. My right foot throbbed. I pulled off my boot and sock. Across my toes, in a line like an old stamp, mud had dried into symbols. Small, stepped shapes, like the carpet pattern, like a path descending. A marking. Marisol stood at the far end of the hall, eyes wide. She hadn't followed, but she'd been waiting. She saw my foot and covered her mouth. What did you see? She whispered. I looked up at the hallway that had changed length 3 times in one day, the posted evacuation plan that lied, the framed photos that hung crooked like they were trying to turn away. I saw the reason, I said. They built a facility on top of something that should have been acknowledged. And when you hide people, the land learns how to hide rooms. In the weeks after, my grandmother declined fast. Not because of the door, not directly, because time was taking her. But she stayed lucid long enough to say one last thing to me. "It's hungry for you now," she whispered. "So you have to live like you're being tracked. No calling out into dark places. No answering when someone says your name from somewhere it shouldn't come from." She died on November 4th, 2023, at 3:26. Peaceful, they told us. I didn't ask questions I didn't want answered. Arthur Haskins was never found. Len Doyle was never found. Reuben's resignation paperwork stayed in a file like a neat lie. Santa Rita Care and Memory is still open. Cynthia Halpern still works there. The state still licenses it. Inspectors still walk the halls with clipboards and never measure the corridor twice. As for me, I transferred out of fugitive work 6 months later. I took a role that kept me behind a desk. I told myself it was burnout. That's what the paperwork said. The truth is, I started hearing my name in places where no one was. A whisper from a drainage culvert under a highway. A call from a dark arroyo after monsoon rain. Once, in my own house, from the laundry room, in my grandmother's voice. And every time, my right toes burned under the skin, like a compass needle twitching towards something underground. If you're watching this and you've ever toured a nursing home, a hospital, a rehab facility, any place where people are losing their way, look at the evacuation plans on the wall. Count the doors. Trust your sense of distance. If you find a door that isn't on any floor plan, don't touch it. Don't joke about it. Don't say names near it. Subscribe if you're from Arizona or anywhere in the desert Southwest, because this isn't the only site like it. And comment if you've ever noticed a hallway that felt longer on the way back than it did on the way in. Most of all, if you hear a loved one call your name from somewhere that shouldn't have a voice, behind a sealed door, under a building, from a corridor that smells like wet earth, don't answer. It learns you when you answer. And once it learns you, it doesn't need a floor plan to find you. If you think this ends with my grandmother, you're wrong. Because the marking on my foot still changes when it rains.